There is a specific kind of silence that exists only in neighborhoods where the average property tax bill could fund a small third-world revolution. It's not a peaceful silence. It's a heavy, judgmental silence. It's the sound of manicured Bermuda grass absorbing sound waves, of triple-paned windows blocking out the cries of the proletariat, and of electric lawn maintenance equipment that hums rather than roars. I live in Whispering Pines Estates. It is a gated community in Northern Virginia, where the streets are paved with asphalt so smooth it feels like velvet, and the residents are paved with Botox so tight they can't blink fully. My name is Mike Thompson. I'm 34. I trade high-volatility futures for a living, and I am currently the neighborhood's public enemy #1. But before the lawsuits, the viral videos, and the cheese incident, I was just a guy trying to wax his car on a Tuesday morning. And what a car it was. I stood back, microfiber towel draped over my shoulder like a waiter at a Michelin star restaurant, and admired the way the morning sun hit the rear quarter panel of my McLaren Artura. If you aren't a car person, let me explain what this machine is. It is not just a car. It is an insult to physics. It is a hybrid supercar that costs roughly $250,000 before you even look at the options list. My spec was finished in volcano yellow, a color so bright, so violent, and so unapologetic that it looked like I had parked a shard of the sun in my driveway. I had spent the last 2 hours applying a ceramic booster spray. I loved this process. The smell of the synthetic wax, the feel of the cool carbon fiber bodywork, the way the light danced off the curves that were designed in a wind tunnel by people who probably dream in mathematical equations. It was my therapy. The markets were chaos. The McLaren was order. "You missed a spot," a voice said. I didn't flinch. I didn't jump. I just sighed, a long, deep exhalation that deflated my chest and my mood instantly. I knew that voice. It was the voice of a woman who had never been wrong in her life, mostly because she refused to acknowledge the existence of alternative viewpoints. I turned around slowly. Barbara Patterson was sitting in her battle station. It was a custom easy-go golf cart, painted a tasteful shade of champagne gold to match her Escalade. It had a rain cover, heated seats, and a custom holder for her oversized insulated tumbler, which I assumed contained either green tea or the blood of unruly tenants. Barbara was the president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. She was also the treasurer, the secretary, and the supreme allied commander of the Architectural Review Committee. She was wearing her uniform, a white visor that shielded her eyes from the sun, but not from the judgment of God, a polo shirt with the HOA crest embroidered on the breast, and khaki capris that ended exactly at mid-calf. "Good morning, Barbara," I said, forcing a smile that felt like I was chewing on aluminum foil. "And no, I didn't. That's just a reflection of the clouds." "It looks like a smudge," she said, squinting. She tapped her steering wheel with a pen. "Though, honestly, with a color that loud, it's hard to tell what's dirt and what's just retinal damage." "It's volcano yellow, Barb. It's supposed to pop." "It pops, all right," she sniffed. "Like a zit." She chuckled at her own joke. I didn't. "Is there something I can do for you?" I asked, turning back to the car to buff out the imaginary smudge. "I'm in the zone here." "Actually, yes, Michael. There is." She never called me Mike. It was always Michael. It was a power move, like calling a dog by its full kennel name when it poops on the rug. "We need to discuss the other vehicle," she said. My hand froze on the fender. I knew this was coming. I had felt the winds of change blowing at the last quarterly meeting, The one I skipped because I preferred to have a root canal without anesthesia. The truck? I asked. The abomination, she corrected. I looked past the gleaming, futuristic silhouette of the McLaren to the far corner of my driveway, tucked shamefully behind a row of boxwoods I had planted specifically for this purpose. There sat Old Betsy. Old Betsy was a 2003 Ford Ranger Edge. She was dark blue, or at least she had been at some point during the Bush administration. Now she was a tapestry of automotive history. The clear coat on the hood was peeling in large, flaky patches that looked like a severe dermatological condition. The rear bumper was twisted upward into a snarl, a souvenir from a contractor who had backed his skid steer into me at the lumberyard 3 years ago. There was a patch of primer on the driver's door that was a slightly different shade of gray than the primer on the fender. But she started every time. She hauled mulch. She hauled lumber. She hauled the greasy, dirty, heavy things that I would never, ever let near the Alcantara interior of the McLaren. I loved that truck. It was honest work in a world of speculative assets. What about her? I asked, protective instincts flaring. She has to go, Barbara said. Her tone was light, breezy, as if she were suggesting I change my socks. Go where? Away. Gone. Out of the neighborhood. Or into the garage, though I suspect with that. She gestured vaguely at the McLaren. Toy of yours taking up the main bay and your wife's massive SUV in the other. There's no room. There isn't, I said. And I need the truck, Barb. I'm building a deck in the backyard next month. I can't put 4x4s in the McLaren. Hire a contractor, she said dismissively. That's what normal people do. I like doing it myself. Barbara sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. She reached into the basket on her dashboard and pulled out a clipboard. The clipboard. It was the source of her power. It held the golden tablets of the HOA bylaws. She flipped a page, the paper crinkling loudly in the silence of the cul-de-sac. Last night, she began, reading like a town crier, the board convened an emergency session to address the declining aesthetic standards of the community. We passed Resolution 404. Resolution 404? I asked. Like Error 404, sense of humor not found? Her eyes narrowed behind her rimless glasses. Resolution 404, the Community Aesthetic Vehicle Standards. I have a copy for you. She ripped a pink sheet off the pad and held it out. I had to walk down the driveway to take it. It felt warm in my hand, radioactive with bureaucracy. I scanned the text. It was dense, single-spaced, and filled with the kind of legal jargon that makes lawyers wealthy and normal people drink at noon. Whereas the Whispering Pines Estates is a premier luxury community dedicated to maintaining the highest visual standards, and whereas the presence of dilapidated, neglected, or visually offensive vehicles detracts from property values, I skipped to the bullet points. Prohibited vehicles include those displaying visible rust or corrosion larger than 1 square inch, peeling, faded, or oxidized paint affecting more than 10% of a panel, mismatched body panels, multicolored, visible body damage, dents, missing trim, broken lights. You wrote this about my truck, I said, looking up at her. This isn't a general rule. This is a targeted assassination. Don't be dramatic, Michael, she smiled, a tight, predatory thing. It applies to everyone. It just so happens that you are the only resident who insists on keeping a piece of scrap metal in his driveway. The Johnsons down the street have a lovely vintage Land Rover. It's old, but it's pristine. That is the standard. The Johnsons' Land Rover doesn't run, Barb. It's a lawn ornament. Betsy runs perfectly. Function is irrelevant, she said. Form is everything. You have 48 hours to bring the vehicle into compliance or remove it from the premises. Failure to do so will result in a fine of $200 per day, escalating by $50 each subsequent day, up to a maximum of the statutory limit, followed by a lien on your property. $200 a day? I choked. That's extortion. That's motivation, she corrected. She put the golf cart into reverse. The electric motor whined. Fix it, hide it, or sell it, Michael. We're tired of looking at it. She backed out, turned the wheel, and glided away toward the Perkins residence, probably to measure their hydrangeas with a laser level. I stood there in the driveway, holding the pink slip, my blood boiling so hot I could have steam-cleaned the pavement. I looked at the McLaren. Then I looked at the truck. Technically, she was right. Betsy was ugly. But she was my ugly. I walked over to the truck and ran my hand along the rough, peeling paint of the hood. It felt like dried lizard skin. I looked at the rust bubbling around the rear wheel well. It was cancer, slow and inevitable. To fix this, to body fill, sand, prime, and paint the whole truck would cost me maybe $4,000. The truck was worth $1,500 on a good day. It made no financial sense. I went inside, threw the pink slip on the kitchen island, and grabbed a beer from the fridge. It was 11:00 a.m. I didn't care. Bad interaction with the sheriff? My wife Sarah asked. She was sitting at the counter, laptop open, working on a presentation. She didn't even look up. She knew the drill. She banned Betsy, I said, cracking the tab. New rule. No ugly cars. Sarah stopped typing. She looked at me, then at the window. Well, honey, you have to admit, the truck is pretty gross. Et tu, brute? I'm just saying the bumper is held on with a zip tie. It's a structural zip tie, I argued. It's industrial grade. Mike, just sell it. You can buy a newer truck, one that isn't two colors. I knew she was right. That was the annoying part. I sat down and opened my laptop. I pulled up the HOA portal to read the full text of the resolution, looking for a loophole. I was a trader. My whole life was finding inefficiencies in the market and exploiting them. There had to be something. I read it again. Vehicles displaying visible rust, peeling paint, mismatched body panels. It was all about the surface. It was all about the condition of the materials. It penalized age, it penalized wear, it penalized the natural entropy of the universe. I sat there for 20 minutes, stewing. I pulled up Kelly Blue Book. I pulled up Craigslist. And then I did it. I listed the truck. By 4:00 p.m., a guy named Dave came by. Dave was a contractor. He wore Carhartt pants that were actually dirty, not fashionably distressed. He looked at Betsy, kicked the tires, and nodded. She runs good? Dave asked. Like a top, I said. AC blows. Cold. Heater blows hot. I don't care about the paint, Dave said. I need something to haul concrete. She loves concrete, I said, patting the fender. He gave me $1,800 cash. I signed the title. I watched him drive away, a puff of blue smoke escaping the tailpipe as he shifted into second gear. I felt a pang of loss, a genuine hollow ache in my chest. I had lost. Barbara had won. She had forced me to alter my life, to sell my property, just to satisfy her visual fetish for suburban perfection. That evening, I was in the garage, staring at the empty space where the truck used to be. The McLaren sat in the center bay, looking like a predatory shark. Barbara walked by. She was walking her poodle, a dog that looked like it cost more than my first college tuition. She stopped at the end of the driveway. She saw the empty spot. She smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a conqueror surveying a razed village. "Much better, Michael," she called out. "See? Was that so hard? The property values just went up a tick." She gave me a little wave, a dainty, dismissive flutter of fingers, and kept walking. That wave, that damn wave. It triggered something in my brain. It wasn't just anger. It was something colder, sharper. It was the part of my brain that calculated risk and reward, the part that spotted a short squeeze before it happened. I went back inside. I didn't go to bed. I went back to the computer. I opened the PDF of Resolution 404 again. I read it slowly, word by word, like a lawyer looking for a trap door. Section 2, Paragraph B, Prohibited Conditions. 1. Visible rust, defined as the presence of iron oxide forming on the exterior metal surfaces. 2. Peeling paint, defined as the degradation of the top coat revealing primer or bare metal. 3. Body damage, defined as physical deformation of the panels. I stopped. I reread the definition of rust. Presence of iron oxide. I reread the definition of peeling paint. Degradation of the top coat. The rules were strictly defined by the material reality of the defect. They banned the existence of rust. They banned the failure of the paint. But they did not ban the image of rust. They banned the reality of decay. But they said nothing about the simulation of it. I looked out the window at the McLaren. It was flawless. It was perfect. It was a blank canvas. A wicked, terrible, wonderful idea began to bloom in my mind. It started as a joke, a what if? What if I just painted the McLaren brown? No, that wasn't enough. Brown is just a color. Barbara would just say it's an ugly color, but technically compliant. I needed something that challenged the very definition of the rule. I needed something that looked exactly, precisely, unequivocally like a violation, while being legally, scientifically, and technically perfect. I needed a wrap. I pulled up Google. I searched for high-end vinyl wrap shops near me. I skipped the ones that specialized in color changes or advertising. I needed an artist. I found a website for a place called Vinyl Voodoo. The landing page featured a Lamborghini Aventador wrapped to look like a fighter jet, complete with fake rivets and no-step warnings. I clicked the Contact button. Name: Mike Thompson. Vehicle: 2024 McLaren Artura. Project description: I want you to ruin it. I want you to make it look like it has been at the bottom of the ocean for 50 years. I want rust. I want corrosion. I want it to look like a health hazard. Call me. I hit send. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, imagining Barbara's face. I imagined her walking by, seeing the McLaren and seeing rot. She wanted to ban ugly. She wanted to police the aesthetic. Fine. I was going to give her the ugliest, most expensive, most legally compliant eyesore this side of the Mississippi. I was going to turn a $250,000 supercar into a rolling middle finger. The next morning, my phone rang at 9:05 a.m. "This Mike?" a gravelly voice asked. "Speaking." "This is Vinny from Vinyl Voodoo. I got your email." "Great." There was a long pause. I could hear a compressor running in the background. "Bro," Vinny said, "are you drunk?" "No," I laughed. "I'm perfectly sober. And I'm very serious." "You have an Artura? The new hybrid one?" "Volcano yellow. Hasn't even hit the first service interval yet. And you want me to rust it? I want you to destroy it, Vinny. Visually speaking. I want it to look like garbage. I want people to ask me if I found it in a dumpster. Why? Because my HOA president is a tyrant who banned my truck because it had a little rust on the fender. So I want to see if she tries to ban a supercar that is covered in fake rust. Vinny laughed. It was a deep, resonant sound, like a V8 engine turning over on a cold morning. Oh man, malicious compliance. I love it. I hate HOAs. My HOA fined me last month for having a gnome in my garden. See? You get it. I get it, Vinny said. But you know this isn't cheap, right? To do it right? To make it look real? We gotta do a full custom print. We gotta design the texture map. We have to matte laminate it to kill the shine. It's gonna cost you probably $5-6 grand. I don't care, I said. If it costs 10 grand, I'll pay it. Can you fit me in? For this? I'll clear my schedule. Bring it in. I want to see this thing. I hung up the phone. I grabbed my keys. I walked out to the garage. The McLaren sat there, pristine and innocent. It had no idea what was about to happen to it. It was like sending a supermodel to a special effects makeup artist to be turned into a zombie. I backed out of the driveway. Barbara was out there again, inspecting the curb appeal of the Robinson house 2 doors down. She looked up as the McLaren purred to life. The engine note was a sophisticated hum, rising to a growl as the gas engine kicked in. She watched me. I rolled down the window. "Heading out, Michael?" she called, squinting at the yellow paint. "Just taking it to the shop, Barb," I yelled back over the engine. "Oh?" She looked delighted. "Selling it? Getting something more sensible? Maybe a nice silver Mercedes?" "Something like that," I lied. "I'm getting some custom work done. I think you're really going to like it. It's very earthy, very organic. It'll blend right in with the trees." "Well, that sounds promising," she nodded, making a check mark on her clipboard. "I look forward to seeing the new look." I suppressed a maniacal giggle. "Oh, you will, Barb," I whispered to myself as I shifted into first gear. "You definitely will." I punched the accelerator. The McLaren launched forward, pinning me to the seat. I blasted out of the neighborhood, leaving the silence and the manicured lawns behind. I was going to war, and I was bringing heavy artillery. The industrial district of the city was a place Barbara Patterson would likely describe as distressing. It was a grid of corrugated metal warehouses, chain-link fences topped with razor wire that wasn't just for show, and roads that hadn't seen a paving crew since the Reagan administration. It was perfect. I navigated the McLaren through the potholes with the delicacy of a neurosurgeon, wincing every time a pebble kicked up into the wheel well. The GPS led me to a building at the end of a cul-de-sac that looked like it had been constructed out of leftover Soviet bunkers. A neon sign flickered in the window, buzzing audibly even from the street. Vinyl Voodoo. The parking lot was a car show for people who drink Monster Energy for breakfast. There was a Subaru WRX with gold rims and a wing large enough to serve a Thanksgiving dinner on. There was a drift missile Nissan 240SX holding on to life by a thread and several hundred zip ties. And then there was me, rolling in with a $250,000 hybrid electric British spaceship. I parked between a dumpster and a Honda Civic that was missing its front bumper. I stepped out, smoothing my polo shirt, feeling aggressively out of place. The door to the shop flew open, and a man stepped out. If Vinny was a car, he would be a Hummer H1. He was wide, built like a brick wall, and covered in ink. He wore a black t-shirt that was straining against the laws of physics to contain his biceps, and a beard that reached his chest. He was wiping his hands on a shop rag, squinting against the sunlight. He looked at the McLaren. Then he looked at me. Then he looked back at the McLaren. "You're the guy," he said. His voice sounded like gravel in a blender. "I'm the guy," I confirmed. "Mike, that's me." Vinny shook his head, a slow, bewildered movement. "I thought you were prank calling me. I told the guys, some frat boy is messing with us. But here you are. And here, that is." He walked around the car. He didn't touch it, he was a pro, but he leaned in close, inspecting the paint. "Volcano yellow," he muttered. "Tri-coat pearl. This paint job alone is probably 20 grand. The ceramic coating is fresh. It's flawless." "It's too flawless," I said. "And you want to cover it?" Vinny asked, looking me in the eye. "You want to take this piece of engineering art and turn it into a rat rod?" "I want to turn it into a weapon, Vinny." He cracked a smile. It changed his whole face. He went from scary biker to mischievous uncle in a split second. "Come inside. The boys have got to hear this." The inside of Vinyl Voodoo smelled of adhesive, solvent, and pizza. It was a large open bay with bright LED lights overhead. A couple of younger guys were working on a Tesla Model 3, wrapping it in a shimmering iridescent purple. They stopped when I walked in with Vinny. "Yo," Vinny announced, clapping his massive hands. "This is Mike. He owns the Artura outside. Gather round, class. Is in session." He led me to a glass-walled office in the corner. It was messy, covered in swatches of vinyl, color wheels, and design renderings. He swept a stack of invoices off a chair and offered it to me. "Sit. Talk to me. I need to understand the psychology here before we get to the design. Why are we desecrating a supercar?" I explained the situation. I told him about Barbara. I told him about old Betsy. I told him about Resolution 404. I recited the specific clauses about visible rust and peeling paint. Vinny listened intently, leaning back in his chair, his fingers steepled. When I got to the part about the daily fines, he slammed his hand on the desk. "I hate HOAs, he growled. "I live out in the county now, but I used to live in a subdivision. They fined me for working on my own car in my own garage with the door open. Said it was unsightly commercial activity. I was changing my oil." "Exactly," I said. "They want control. They want everything to look the same. They want sterilized perfection." "And you want to give them chaos," Vinny said, nodding slowly. "I respect that. I respect that deep." He turned to his computer. He had a triple monitor setup that looked like it belonged to a NASA engineer. He fired up a design program and pulled up a 3D model of a McLaren Artura. "Okay," Vinny said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's get ugly. How far are we taking this? Are we talking neglected or are we talking post-apocalyptic?" "I want it to look like it was dredged out of a swamp," I said. "I want it to look like it has tetanus. I want it to look like if you touch it, you'll need a booster shot." Music to my ears. Vinny started clicking. He pulled up a texture library. "We start with the base," he explained, dragging a file onto the car model. The bright yellow on the screen was instantly replaced by a mottled brownish orange. "This is a high-res scan of oxidized steel from an old shipping container. See the pitting? We can print that." "Darker," I said. "More grime." He adjusted the sliders. The car on the screen darkened. It looked dirty. "Now," Vinny said, zooming in on the hood. "The bylaws say peeling paint, right?" "Right. So we can't actually peel your paint, but we can layer the vinyl. We can print a graphic that looks like the yellow paint is flaking off, revealing gray primer underneath, and then rust underneath that. We create a trompe-l'oeil effect." Optical illusion. "Can you do bubbles?" I asked. "You know how rust bubbles up under the paint before it bursts?" "Oh, absolutely," Vinny said, his eyes lighting up. We use a shading gradient. We put a highlight on top and a shadow on the bottom of the bubble. From 5 feet away, it'll look 3D. You'll want to pick at it. We spent the next 2 hours iterating. It was the most fun I'd had in years. We were 2 grown men giggling over how to make a luxury asset look like trash. What about the doors? Vinny asked. The car has those butterfly doors that swing up. We should do something with that. The bylaws ban mismatched body panels, I recalled. Okay, Vinny tapped his chin. So if we wrapped one door in a different color, that technically violates the rule because it mimics a mismatched panel. Wait, I said. The rule bans actual mismatched panels. It bans the condition of having parts from different cars. If the wrap is one continuous piece of material, it's not a mismatched panel. It's a picture of a mismatched panel. Vinny pointed a finger at me. That's the loophole. Let's drive a truck through it. He clicked on the driver's side door. He changed the texture from the rusty orange to a flat, dull primer gray. He added grease stains around the handle. He even added a graphic of a junkyard marking. Yellow grease pencil writing that said 04 Civic, $50. That is genius, I said. It implies the door came off a Honda. It's subtle, Vinny agreed. Classy. I need the bumper to look like it's falling off, I said. Barbara specifically mentioned body damage. Duct tape, Vinny said instantly. Silver duct tape. I'll scan a piece of actual tape, high resolution. We'll print it across the seam of the front bumper. We'll make it look like the carbon fiber splitter is cracked and you fixed it with $3 of adhesive. Perfect. And the rivets, Vinny added. I want to put fake industrial rivets all along the wheel arches, like you bolted on some cheap fender flares. Do it. By the time we were done, the car on the screen looked horrific. It looked like a Mad Max vehicle that had been rejected for being too ugly. The contrast between the sleek, aerodynamic silhouette of the McLaren and the textures of rot and decay was jarring. It messed with your eyes. This is going to be a nightmare to install, Vinny said, looking at the design with pride. We have to line up the rust streaks across the panel gaps. If we're off by a millimeter, the illusion breaks. It's got to be seamless. How much? I asked. Vinny did some math on a calculator. Custom design fee, full body print on premium 3M cast vinyl, matte over laminate to kill the gloss, plus the install labor. Honestly? Usually this is $6,000. For you? $5,000 flat. Because I want pictures of your neighbor's face. Deal, I said, shaking his hand. His grip could have crushed a coconut. One thing, though, Vinny said, leaning back. The wheels. What about them? They're gloss black. They're shiny. They're gonna look weird. Leave them, I said. I want the contrast. I want people to see the wheels and be confused. I want them to wonder if the car is fast or if it's going to explode. The wheels are the clue that it's all a lie. You're a twisted man, Mike, Vinny said. I like it. Drop the keys. Give me a week. Do not call me asking if it's done. You can't rush art. Leaving the McLaren behind was difficult. I handed the key fob to Vinny, and he tossed it to one of the younger guys who looked like he had just been handed the Holy Grail. Don't joyride it, I warned half-heartedly. Mike, Vinny said sternly. My guys move cars at 3 miles per hour. If this car leaves the lot, I will personally turn them into a pretzel. I called an Uber. The driver arrived in a Toyota Camry that smelled intensely of vanilla air freshener. He looked at me, standing in the parking lot of a gritty warehouse district. Car trouble? He asked as I got in. Something like that, I said. Just getting a makeover. The ride back to Whispering Pines was a transition between worlds. We left the cracked pavement and chain-link fences, merged onto the highway, and eventually exited onto the smooth, tree-lined boulevards of suburbia. The closer we got to my house, the tighter my chest felt. It wasn't anxiety. It was anticipation. When the Uber dropped me off, the driveway felt conspicuously empty. The garage door was closed. The house looked quiet. I walked up the driveway, checking the mailbox. It was empty, except for a flyer for a luxury landscaping service. I went inside and poured a drink. I stood by the window, watching the street. It didn't take long. Around 5:00 p.m., the gold golf cart whirred into view. Barbara was on patrol. She slowed down as she approached my house. She stopped completely at the end of the driveway. She adjusted her visor. She stared at the empty spot where Betsy used to be, and where the McLaren had been that morning. She pulled out her phone. She typed something. Then she smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of a bureaucrat who believes the system has worked. She nodded to herself, put the cart in gear, and drove off. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was an email from the HOA portal. Subject: Compliance Acknowledgement. Dear Michael, the board has noted the removal of the non-compliant vehicles from your property. Appreciate your prompt cooperation in adhering to Resolution 404. It is gratifying to see residents taking pride in the community aesthetic. Let's keep the driveway clear and up to standard. Sincerely, Barbara Patterson, President, WPHOA. I read it twice. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my bourbon. Oh, Barbara, I said to the empty room, you have no idea. The next 5 days were agonizing. I was stuck driving my wife's Audi SUV, which is a perfectly fine car, but it lacks the soul of the McLaren. It also lacks the ability to cause a scene. I kept a low profile. I waved at neighbors. I mowed my lawn, diagonally, just to be fancy. I brought my trash cans in early. I was the model citizen. Barbara waved at me every time she passed. She even stopped once to chat. So, where did the yellow car go? She asked, feigning casual interest. Traded in? It's at a specialist, I said, leaning on my rake. Getting a protective film applied. To keep it looking appropriate. Smart, she said. Those bright colors fade so fast. Maybe you're getting it wrapped in something more neutral? A nice slate gray? It's definitely going to be different, I promised. It's going to have a lot of character. Character is good, she said, completely missing the trap. As long as it's tasteful. Taste is subjective, isn't it? Not in Whispering Pines, she said sharply. Here, taste is codified. She drove off. I went inside and called Vinny. Is it done? I told you not to call me, Vinny grunted. I can't take it anymore. She's gloating, Vinny. She thinks she won. I'm printing the rear bumper right now, Vinny said. The printer is doing the rust texture pass. It's mesmerizing. We had a little issue with the curve of the fender. The vinyl wanted to stretch too much and distort the rivet graphic. But we fixed it. We heated it and shrunk it. It looks bolted on now. When? Friday, he said. Come by at 5. We're doing a reveal. I bought pizza. Friday arrived. The air was thick with humidity, a storm threatening to break in the evening. It was pathetic fallacy at its finest. I took another Uber to the shop. The driver this time was a chatty college kid. What are you picking up? He asked. A mistake, I said. An expensive, beautiful mistake. We pulled into the lot of vinyl Voodoo. The bay doors were closed. My heart was hammering in my ribs. This was it. $5,000. My reputation. My war with the HOA. It all came down to this reveal. I walked in the side door. The shop was quiet. Vinny and 3 of his guys were standing in a semicircle around a car covered in a black silk drop cloth. Vinny looked tired, but triumphant. He had dark circles under his eyes, but he was grinning like a maniac. "Ready?" Vinny asked. "Born ready." "So," Vinny gestured to the shrouded shape. "We had some fun with the details. We decided the duct tape wasn't enough. We added some zip ties to the rear diffuser, and we took the liberty of adding a bumper sticker. I hope you don't mind." "What does it say?" "You'll see." Vinny grabbed the corner of the black cloth. "Gentlemen," he said to his crew, "unveil the beast." They pulled the cloth back. For a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I knew it was my car. I knew it was a McLaren Artura, but my eyes were telling me I was looking at a crime scene. It was revolting. The beautiful volcano yellow was gone. In its place was a mottled, diseased skin of brown, orange, and black. The rust looked so deep you felt like you could stick your hand into it. The holes in the fender revealed corroded mechanical parts underneath. The driver's door was the masterpiece Vinny had promised. It was a flat, dead primer gray, starkly clashing with the rust. The grease pencil writing on the door, Euro 4 Civic, looked like it had been scrawled by a junkyard attendant in a hurry. The front bumper featured the duct tape. It looked like 3 strips of silver tape were holding the splitter together. The printing was so high resolution you could see the little fabric threads in the tape. I walked closer. I reached out and touched the fender. My brain expected rough, flaky metal. My fingers met smooth, warm vinyl. The cognitive dissonance gave me vertigo. "Look at the rivets," Vinny pointed. I looked at the wheel arches. There were graphic bolts printed every 3 inches, with little streaks of rust running down from them, as if they had been weeping rainwater for decades. "And the bumper sticker," Vinny said, pointing to the rear. I walked around to the back. The rear engine cover looked like it was held shut with bungee cords. Printed, of course. And there, on the back bumper, right next to the exhaust pipes that could spit blue fire, was a faded, peeling bumper sticker that was part of the wrap design. It read, "My other car is a Porsche." I burst out laughing. It was the perfect touch of trashy. "It's horrible," I said, beaming. "It's the worst thing I've ever seen. I love it." "The matte laminate really sells it," Vinny said, stroking the roof. "It eats the light, no reflections. Just dull, dead paint." "It looks like it smells bad," one of the shop guys noted. "Like wet cardboard and oil." "That's the goal," Vinny said. I opened the door. The interior was still pristine. Black leather, Alcantara, digital screens. It was like stepping from a slum into a penthouse. The contrast was jarring. I sat in the driver's seat. I pushed the start button. The digital dashboard lit up. The engine purred. "Vinny," I said, rolling down the window, "you are a genius. If I get sued, I'm calling you as an expert witness." "I'll wear a suit," Vinny promised. "A tuxedo t-shirt." I paid the bill. I tipped the guys $100 each for the pizza. "Go give 'em hell," Vinny said as I backed out of the bay. I drove out of the industrial park. As I hit the main road, I noticed the reaction immediately. A guy in a BMW M3 pulled up next to me at a red light. He looked over. He frowned. He looked at the badge on the front of the car. He looked at the rust. He looked at me. He rolled down his window. "Dude!" he yelled. "What happened to your car? Did you crash it?" "It's a survivor," I yelled back. "Barn find." "A barn find Artura?" He looked confused. "They came out like 2 years ago." "Time travel," I shouted as the light turned green and I floored it. The electric torque hit instantly. The car rocketed forward, leaving the confused BMW driver in the dust. The car looked like it should be struggling to hit 40, but it was doing highway speeds in seconds. I laughed all the way to Whispering Pines. The sun was setting as I approached the gatehouse. The security guard, Greg, knew me. He usually just waved me through. This time he stepped out of the booth. He held up a hand. His jaw was hanging open. I rolled down the window. "Mr. Thompson?" Greg asked, peering at the duct tape on the bumper. "Evening, Greg. Is everything okay? Did you have an accident?" "Nope, just a new look. What do you think?" I think you might need a tetanus shot just sitting in it," Greg said honestly. "That's the vibe we were going for. Can I go in?" "Technically, yeah," Greg said, hitting the button to lift the gate. "But Mrs. Patterson is on the warpath today. She's measuring grass height with a ruler. If she sees this—" "I'm counting on it," I said. I drove through the gates. The smooth asphalt of Whispering Pines hummed beneath my tires. The houses were perfect. The lawns were perfect. The trees were perfect. And then there was me. A rolling blight. A mobile disaster zone. I turned onto my street. I kept the speed low. I wanted to be seen. I saw Mr. Henderson watering his lawn again. He dropped the hose. He stared. I saw Mrs. Gable walking her golden retriever. The dog didn't care, but Mrs. Gable looked like she had just seen a ghost. And then I saw the gold golf cart. It was parked in front of my house. Barbara was there, talking to Karen. They were pointing at my empty driveway, probably discussing how much better the property values were now that the eyesore truck was gone. I didn't honk. I didn't rev the engine. I just coasted up to the curb in electric mode, silent and deadly. I pulled into the driveway. I parked right in the center, ensuring the mismatched gray door was facing them. I killed the ignition. The silence that followed was heavy. I opened the door, the one that looked like it belonged on a 2004 Civic, and stepped out. Barbara turned around. Her smile dropped. Her clipboard slipped from her hand and clattered onto the pavement. Her eyes went wide, reflecting the horror of the rusted hulk sitting in her field of vision. "Honey, I'm home," I called out cheerfully. Barbara made a sound, like a deflating balloon. "Is that," she whispered, "is that the McLaren?" "Sure is," I said, patting the roof, right on a graphic of a giant rust spot. "Custom job. Do you like it? I call it urban decay." Barbara's face turned a color that was not on the approved HOA palette. It was a deep, violaceous purple. She fumbled for her phone. Her hands were shaking. "I'm calling the police," she screeched, her voice cracking. "I'm calling the police right now. That is a hazard. That is unauthorized. That is disgusting." "It's art, Barbara," I said, locking the car. The mirrors folded in with a sleek, electronic whir that contrasted perfectly with the garbage aesthetic. "And it's fully compliant." "We'll see about that," she yelled, dialing 911 with furious thumbs. I walked up the steps to my front door, whistling. The trap was sprung. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the flashing lights. I walked into the house, locking the front door behind me with a decisive click. The air conditioning was humming, a stark contrast to the humid, electrically charged atmosphere I had just left in the driveway. My wife, Sarah, was standing in the foyer. She was holding a glass of Pinot Grigio. She wasn't drinking it. She was just holding it, like a shield. She was staring out the sidelight window next to the door, her eyes fixed on the driveway. She didn't turn around when I walked in. She just kept staring. "Mike," she said. Her voice was flat, calm, dangerously calm. "Hey, honey," I said, kicking off my shoes. "How was your day?" "Mike," she repeated. "Why is there a homeless encampment parked in our driveway?" I walked over and stood behind her, peering out the window. From this angle, the Artura looked even worse. The setting sun was hitting the mismatched primer gray door, making it look dull and lifeless against the fake rust of the rear fender. The duct tape on the front bumper seemed to mock the very concept of structural integrity. "It's the Artura," I said softly. "I know it's the Artura," she said. "I recognize the silhouette. It's like seeing a supermodel wearing a trash bag." "It's a protective wrap," I corrected, "to keep the paint fresh." Sarah finally turned to look at me. Her expression was a mix of awe and pity. "You spent $5,000 to make a $250,000 car look like it has meth teeth?" "I spent $5,000 to prove a point. And the point is? That Barbara Patterson is not the god of this cul-de-sac." Sarah sighed, took a long sip of her wine, and looked back out the window. "Well, your point is currently hyperventilating on the sidewalk." I looked. Barbara was still there. She had been joined by Karen, the vice president of the HOA, who lived 3 houses down. They were huddled together by the gold golf cart, pointing at my car and clutching each other for moral support. Barbara was on the phone, pacing back and forth, her free hand chopping the air in aggressive gestures. "She's calling the cops," I said, checking my watch. "Right on schedule." "You want a drink?" Sarah asked, heading for the kitchen. "If we're going to be the neighborhood pariahs, I want to be buzzed." "Bourbon," I said. "Neat." We stood in the kitchen for 10 minutes, sipping our drinks, waiting for the inevitable. It felt like the calm before a hurricane. Outside, the gathering darkness was making the rust on the car look even more sinister. Under the streetlights, the wrap absorbed the light rather than reflecting it, creating a black hole of ugliness in the middle of the pristine neighborhood. Then, the lights washed over the living room walls. Blue, red, blue, red. No sirens. In Whispering Pines, sirens were considered noise pollution. The police knew to cut them at the gatehouse unless there was an active shooter. "Showtime," I said, draining my glass. "I'm staying here," Sarah said, sitting on a bar stool. "If I come out there, I might actually punch Barbara, and we can't afford that legal fee on top of the car wrap." "Smart." I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. The tableau before me was a masterpiece of suburban absurdity. 2 police cruisers were parked at weird angles in the street, blocking the cul-de-sac. Their lights strobed silently, illuminating the manicured hedges and the terrifying vehicle in my driveway. Barbara was standing near the first cruiser, practically vibrating. She was talking to an officer I recognized immediately. Officer Miller. Miller looked exhausted. He was a man who had joined the force to fight crime, catch bad guys, and make a difference. Instead, he spent his shifts mediating disputes about fence heights and barking dogs in a zip code where the average income was higher than the GDP of a small island nation. He was listening to Barbara, his notebook out, his face a mask of practiced patience. "And it's leaking." "Fluids!" Barbara was shrieking. "Look at the hood! That is oil! That is hazardous waste! It's going to run off into the storm drains and poison the retention pond. Think of the geese, officer! The geese!" "Ma'am, calm down," Miller said, his voice deep and soothing. "I need you to take a breath." "Don't tell me to breathe," she snapped. "Look at it. It's a wreck. It's abandoned. He probably stole it from a salvage yard and dumped it here to spite me. I walked down the steps, hands clearly visible, wearing my best confused homeowner expression. "Evening, Officer Miller," I called out. Miller looked up. Recognition flashed in his eyes. He let out a breath that puffed his cheeks out. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "we got a call about an abandoned vehicle and a potential environmental hazard." "Abandoned?" I laughed, walking down the driveway. "I just parked it 20 minutes ago." Barbara pointed a shaking finger at me. "He admits it! He parked that monstrosity! It violates Resolution 404. It violates the county code on blight. Officer, arrest him for illegal dumping." Miller looked at the car. He really looked at it. He took a step back, his hand instinctively going to his belt. In the flashing police lights, the car looked truly horrifying. The rust seemed to be eating the metal alive. The duct tape on the bumper caught the light, looking flimsy and desperate. The mismatched door looked like it had been salvaged from a fire. "Jesus, Mike," Miller said, dropping the formal title. "What the hell happened? Did you roll it?" "Roll it?" I asked innocently. "No, sir. Drives like a dream." "Look at the front end," Miller gestured with his pen. "The bumper is held on with tape. That's a safety violation. If that falls off on the highway..." "It's not going to fall off," I said. "It's tape!" Barbara yelled. "It's duct tape! It's trash!" Miller walked toward the car. He pulled a flashlight from his belt and clicked it on. The sun beam cut through the darkness, highlighting the corrosion on the fender. "I'm gonna have to write you up for this, Mike," Miller said, shaking his head. "You can't drive a vehicle in this condition. Unsafe equipment, jagged metal edges. Look at that hole in the fender." He pointed the light at the graphic of the rust hole that revealed the engine parts underneath. "Be careful, officer," I said, suppressing a grin. "It's sharp." Miller reached out. He wanted to check the structural integrity of the fender. He expected his finger to catch on jagged, rusty metal. He expected to feel the flaking crunch of oxidation. He pressed his finger against the hole. He froze. He didn't pull his hand away. He just stood there, finger pressed against the fender, staring at it. He rubbed his finger back and forth. Squeak, squeak. It was the sound of clean, polished vinyl. Miller frowned. He moved his light closer. He leaned in until his nose was inches from the rust. He touched the duct tape. It was perfectly smooth. He touched the cracked headlight. It was solid, unbroken polycarbonate. He stood up slowly. He turned off his flashlight. He looked at me. "Is this..." Miller started, then stopped. He looked back at the car. "Is this a sticker?" "It's a wrap, officer," I said. "High-quality 3M vinyl, installed by a professional." "A wrap?" Miller repeated. "You wrapped a car to look like it was totaled?" "It's an aesthetic choice," I said. "I'm going for a post-consumerism vibe." Miller looked at the car again. Then he looked at Barbara. Then he looked at me. And then he broke. It started as a snort. Then a chuckle. Then Officer Miller, a 20-year veteran of the force, bent over, put his hands on his knees, and laughed until he wheezed. "Oh my God," he gasped, wiping a tear from his eye. I thought you hit a landmine." "It's not funny," Barbara screamed. She stamped her foot. "Officer, do your job. Tow it." Miller straightened up, trying to regain his composure. He cleared his throat, but the corners of his mouth were twitching uncontrollably. "Ma'am," Miller said, "I can't tow it." "Why not?" she demanded. "It's garbage." "No, ma'am," Miller said, walking over and patting the rusty roof. "It's a sticker. The car underneath is, well, I'm assuming it's that yellow McLaren you usually drive?" "The very same," I said. "Underneath this, the paint is factory fresh. Not a scratch on her." "But it looks broken," Barbara argued. "It looks like an eyesore." "Being ugly isn't a crime, Ms. Patterson," Miller said. "If it were, half the Hondas in this town would be impounded. The vehicle is structurally sound. The lights work. The glass is intact. The damage is an optical illusion." "But the oil!" She pointed at the hood. "The leak!" Miller shone his light on the oil stain. "That's ink, ma'am. It's dry." Barbara looked like she was going to have a stroke. Her face was flushed, her veins popping. She turned on me. "You did this on purpose," she hissed. "You did this to mock me." "I did this to comply with your rules, Barb," I said, stepping closer. "Resolution 404 bans visible rust. This car has no rust. It bans peeling paint. This car has no peeling paint. It bans body damage. This car has no body damage." "It violates the spirit of the law," she cried. "I don't care about spirits," I said coldly. "I care about the letter. And by the letter of your law, this car is perfect." Miller was hiding a smile behind his hand. "He's got you there, ma'am. It's technically compliant." "I will not stand for this," Barbara seethed. She turned to the crowd that had gathered. Oh yes, there was a crowd now. The flashing lights had drawn them out like moths. Mr. Henderson was there in his bathrobe. The Johnsons were there. Even the weird guy from the corner house who never comes out was standing by his mailbox, watching. They were all staring at the car. "Is that rust?" Mrs. Johnson asked, squinting. "It's a wrap!" I shouted to the audience. "It's a disguise!" "It's kind of cool," the weird guy from the corner muttered. "It is not cool," Barbara shouted at him. "It is a blight. It lowers our property values. Who would want to buy a house next to that?" "Actually," Miller interjected, looking at the car with genuine admiration now. "It's pretty impressive work. Who did it? Vinyl Voodoo?" "Vinny's the best," I confirmed. "I've seen their work at the auto show," Miller nodded. "Never seen anything this bold, though." Barbara had had enough. She realized the police weren't going to help her. She realized she had lost the battle for authority in the street. She drew herself up to her full height, which was about 5'4" of concentrated malice. "Fine," she spat. "The police won't act, but the HOA will. You think you're clever, Michael? You think this is a game?" "I think you started a game you couldn't finish, Barb." "I will fine you," she threatened, pointing her clipboard at me like a weapon. "I will fine you for every single day that thing sits in your driveway. I will fine you for visual nuisance. I will fine you for non-conforming aesthetics. I will bankrupt you." "You can try," I said. "But I think you'll find my lawyer is very good at reading the dictionary definitions of words like rust and damage." "We'll see," she said. "Enjoy your victory lap, Michael. It's going to cost you." She turned and marched back to her golf cart. Karen scurried after her like a frightened sidekick. They sped off into the darkness, the electric motor whining in protest. Miller sighed and hitched up his belt. "Well, that was exciting." "Sorry for the waste of time, officer," I said. "Are you kidding?" Miller grinned. "I'm going to tell the guys at the station about this for months. The zombie McLaren. You're a legend, Mike. Just trying to survive. The suburbs, Miller." "Hey." He paused, looking at the car one last time. "Does it still go fast?" 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds. Miller whistled. "Wolf in sheep's clothing. Or wolf in garbage clothing. Have a good night, Mike. Try not to give Barbara a heart attack. Too much paperwork. No promises. The police cruisers turned off their lights. The silence rushed back into the cul-de-sac, heavy and thick. Miller waved as he drove off. I stood alone in the driveway for a moment. The neighbors lingered. Mr. Henderson walked over. He was an older guy, retired attorney, generally grumpy. He looked at the car. He bent down and touched the duct tape. He stood up. He looked at me. "That cost a fortune, didn't it?" he asked. "It wasn't cheap, Frank." "Heh," he chuckled. A dry, dusty sound. "I hate that woman. Good for you, son. Good for you." He shuffled back to his house. I walked back inside. Sarah was waiting in the foyer. The bottle of bourbon was on the counter. "Well?" she asked. "Miller loved it," I said, closing the door. "Barbara, not so much." "Is she going to fine us?" "Oh, absolutely. She's going to throw the book at us." "How much?" $500 a day, probably." Sarah looked at me. She looked at the expensive car in the driveway that looked like trash. She looked at the smile on my face. She picked up the bourbon bottle and poured me another glass. "Worth it," she said. The adrenaline of the confrontation carried me through the weekend. I spent Saturday sitting on my porch, drinking coffee, and watching cars slow down as they drove past. It was incredible. The double takes were dangerous. People would drive by, slam on their brakes, back up, and stare. I saw phones come out. I saw fingers pointing. I became a local tourist attraction. But Monday morning brought the hangover. I walked out to the car to go to work. Taped to the windshield, right over the graphic of the cracked glass, was an envelope. It was heavy, thick, expensive cardstock. I opened it. Notice of violation. Resident, Michael Thompson, address, 1402, Oakwood Drive. Violation, Resolution 404, prohibited vehicle condition. Rust, disrepair, blight. Description. Vehicle displays excessive rust, body damage, and unpainted panels. Vehicle constitutes a visual nuisance and degrades the community standard. Action required. Remove vehicle immediately. Fine assessment. $500 and dollars daily. Recurring. Yes. I stared at the paper. She hadn't even hesitated. She ignored the police. She ignored the reality. She was fining me based on her perception of the car. "So it begins," I muttered. I didn't pay it. Obviously. Instead, I logged into the HOA portal. I filed a formal dispute. Reason for dispute. The violation cites rust and body damage. The vehicle has neither. The vehicle is covered in a vinyl protective film. Please see attached photos of the vehicle prior to wrapping and the invoice from the installer describing the material as printed vinyl. The vehicle is in mint condition. I hit send. Tuesday morning, another envelope on the windshield. Notice of violation. Fine assessment, $1,000, cumulative. Wednesday, notice of violation. Fine assessment, $1,500. Cumulative. She was fining me every single morning. She must have been waking up at dawn just to walk over and tape the envelope to my car. It was dedication, bordering on psychosis. By Friday, I owed the HOA $20,500. I received a summons to appear at the monthly board meeting the following Tuesday. The subject line was, "Review of outstanding violations and potential lien placement." They were going to put a lien on my house, over a sticker. I called Vinny. "Hey, it's Mike, the artist formerly known as Sane." "Mikey!" Vinny shouted over the sound of a grinder. "How's the beast?" Infamous. The cops laughed. The neighbors are confused. But the HOA is fining me $500 a day. Ouch. I have a hearing on Tuesday. I need ammunition. What kind? I need a sample, I said. I need a piece of the vinyl you used. And I need a piece of actual rusty metal. Like dangerous, tetanusy metal. I got a scrap bin full of jagged metal, Vinny said. Come on by. Also, I said, a thought occurring to me. Do you know anyone who appraises cars? I know a guy, Vinny said. Why? Because Barbara claims I'm lowering property values. I need to prove that this car, in its current state, is actually worth more than her house. Malicious, Vinny laughed. I'll text you his number. Tuesday night, the community center. The room was packed. Usually HOA meetings are attended by 3 people, the board, and maybe one person complaining about a barking dog. Tonight, there were 30 people. The zombie McLaren had become the talk of the town. People wanted to see the showdown. I walked in wearing a suit. I carried a briefcase. I looked like I was there to merge a corporation, not argue about car stickers. Barbara sat at the head of the table. She looked tired. Her eyes were puffy, but her glare was sharp enough to cut glass. Calling the meeting to order, she said, banging her gavel with unnecessary force. First item on the agenda, the situation at 1402 Oakwood Drive. She looked at me. Mr. Thompson, you have accrued $3,500 in fines over the last week. You have refused to bring your vehicle into compliance. You have refused to pay. Explain yourself before we file the lien. I stood up. I walked to the front of the room. I placed my briefcase on the table. Madam President, board members, I began, my voice projecting to the back of the room. I am here to appeal these fines on the grounds that they are factually incorrect, scientifically impossible, and legally harassment. The car is rusty, Barbara shouted, losing her cool immediately. We have eyes, Michael. It is brown. It is spotted. It looks like trash. Looks, I said, raising a finger. That is the key word. It looks like trash. But is it? I opened my briefcase. I pulled out a jagged, nasty piece of rusted sheet metal I had gotten from Vinny. I dropped it on the table. It made a heavy, metallic clatter. Rust flakes scattered onto the polished wood. Barbara recoiled. What is that? That, I said, is rust. Iron oxide. It is brittle. It stains. It is structural degradation. I reached into the briefcase again. I pulled out a square of the printed vinyl. I slapped it onto the table next to the metal. This, I said, is plastic. Polyvinyl chloride. It is smooth. It is durable. It is what is on my car. I picked up the vinyl and waved it. Resolution 404 prohibits visible rust. My car has 0 rust. It has a picture of rust. If I hung a painting of a fire in my window, would you call the fire department? A titter of laughter ran through the audience. It's irrelevant. The treasurer, a man named Bob, who looked like he slept in his tie, spoke up. The bylaw is about aesthetics. It's about the community standard. Your car does not meet the standard of luxury required in Whispering Pines. Ah, I said. The luxury argument. I was waiting for that. I pulled out a document. I have here an appraisal, I said, holding it up. Dated yesterday. This vehicle, a 2024 McLaren Artura with the Urban Decay custom wrap, was appraised at $265,000. I looked at Barbara. Barbara, what is the blue book value of your 2018 Cadillac Escalade? She blinked. That's personal. It's about $40,000, I answered for her. So my trash is worth 6 times more than your luxury vehicle. If we are fining based on value, shouldn't you be fining yourself? The audience laughed louder this time. Barbara banged the gavel furiously. "Order! Order!" she screamed. "The value doesn't matter. It's the visual. It's an eyesore. It looks like a junkyard dog in a poodle show." "That's your opinion," I said. "And opinions are not enforceable. The bylaws are. And the bylaws specify condition. You wrote them, Barbara. You wrote the specific definitions of rust and peeling paint to target my old truck. You got specific. And because you got specific, you created a loophole." I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. "I am in full compliance with every single letter of Resolution 404. My paint is perfect. It's just covered. My body panels are perfect. They're just wrapped. I have no rust. I have no damage." "We have discretion," Barbara argued. "The board has the final say on what constitutes a blight." "Then use your discretion to recognize art," I said. "Because if you file a lien on my house for a car that is technically perfect, I will sue this HOA for harassment, slander, and the devaluation of my property. And I will win. And the legal fees will come out of the Community Reserve Fund." I turned to the audience. "That means your dues will go up," I told them, "to pay for Barbara's grudge against my vinyl sticker." The mood in the room shifted instantly. The neighbors stopped laughing. They started murmuring. No one wanted their dues to go up. "I move to dismiss the fines," Mr. Henderson shouted from the back row. "Seconded," someone else yelled. Barbara looked around the room, panic in her eyes. She was losing the room. She was losing her grip. We will take this under advisement," she stammered. "We will review the legal definitions. Meeting adjourned." She banged the gavel and practically ran out of the room. I stood there, gathering my rust and my vinyl. I had won the battle. But I hadn't won the war. Barbara wasn't the type to give up. She was the type to escalate. And sure enough, 2 days later, I got a letter. Not from the HOA, from a lawyer. Subject: Civil Action, Whispering Pines HOA versus Michael Thompson. They were suing me. They weren't just fining me anymore. They were taking me to court to force the removal of the wrap, claiming it breached the good faith clause of the community covenant. I smiled. "Okay, Barbara," I said, dialing Vinny's number. "You want to go to court? Let's go to court. But first, I need to make this car famous." The lawsuit landed on my doorstep with a heavy, ominous thud that only expensive legal paperwork can achieve. It was delivered by a courier who looked like he regretted every life choice that had led him to my porch. I sat at the kitchen island, coffee in hand, reading the document. Sarah stood behind me, reading over my shoulder, her grip on my shoulder tightening with every paragraph. Plaintiff: Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. Defendant: Michael Thompson, cause of action: breach of covenant, good faith violation, creation of public nuisance, diminution of community standards. "They aren't messing around anymore," Sarah said softly. "Mike, this is a civil suit. They want an injunction. They want a judge to force us to remove the wrap. And they want us to pay their legal fees." "Breach of good faith," I read aloud, chuckling darkly. "That's rich. Barbara finds me for a truck I used to fix my house, spies on me through the window and calls the police on a parked car, but I'm the one acting in bad faith?" "What are we going to do?" Sarah asked. "We can't afford a protracted legal battle with the HOA. Their war chest is funded by our dues. We're essentially paying them to sue us." "That is the irony of the suburban condition," I noted. "But we don't need to outspend them. We just need to outsmart them." I flipped to the section on diminution of value. The defendant's vehicle, by virtue of its dilapidated and grotesque appearance, creates a negative visual impact that lowers the perceived value of the surrounding properties. It signals a neighborhood in decline, thereby harming the collective investment of all residents. That's their pivot, I said, tapping the paper. They realized the technical argument about rust was a loser because there is no rust. So now they're pivoting to the subjective argument. It looks cheap, therefore it makes the neighborhood look cheap. Well, Sarah said, looking out the window at the rusty supercar. It does look cheap. That's the point. To us, it looks like a joke, I said. To Barbara, it looks like poverty. But to the rest of the world, I bet it looks like something else entirely. What are you thinking? I need to prove that this car isn't a liability, I said, standing up. I need to prove it's an asset. I need to prove that the zombie McLaren is actually more culturally significant and valuable than Barbara's beige existence. And how do you do that? I'm going to enter it in a beauty pageant. The Grand Dominion, Concours d'Elegance, is the kind of car show where people wear salmon-colored pants and straw boaters without a hint of irony. It's held on the manicured fairway of a local country club, about 20 miles from Whispering Pines. It is the Super Bowl for people who think a car isn't a car unless it requires a team of artisans to start the engine. The entry fee was $500. The application required photos. I sent them photos of the McLaren before the wrap. I sent them the factory build sheet. 2024. Artura, Volcano Yellow. Tech Lux specification. Technically, I wasn't lying. That was the car. It just happened to be wearing a costume at the moment. 2 days later, I got the acceptance email. We are delighted to welcome your Artura to the modern supercar class. Vinny, I yelled into the phone on Friday afternoon. Clear your Saturday. We're going to the country club. I don't own a polo shirt, Mike, Vinny grumbled. Buy one. We need to look respectable. We're going to verify the value of the asset. Saturday morning was crisp and clear, perfect car show weather. I woke up early to detail the car. This was a bizarre process. Usually before a show, you wash, clay bar, polish, and wax until the paint looks like liquid glass. For the zombie McLaren, detailing meant taking a bottle of matte detail spray and wiping down the fake rust to make sure it didn't look too shiny. I wanted the oil stains on the hood to look greasy, not glossy. I drove to the country club with Sarah in the passenger seat. She was wearing a sundress and large sunglasses, fully embracing the role of the eccentric millionaire's wife. If we get kicked out, she warned, I'm driving home in an Uber. I will not be escorted off a golf course by security while riding in a rust bucket. Have faith, I said. We pulled up to the gate of the Grand Dominion Country Club. There was a line of cars waiting to enter the show field. Ahead of me was a 1965 Jaguar E-Type, gleaming in British racing green. Behind me was a Ferrari 296 GTB in traditional Rosso Corsa. And in the middle, there was me. The gate attendant was a young guy with a clipboard and a headset. He waved the Jaguar through with a deferential nod. I pulled up. The electric motor hummed silently. The attendant looked at the car. His eyes went wide. He looked at the duct tape on the front bumper. He looked at the mismatched gray door. He looked at his clipboard. Name? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. Thompson, I said, flashing a dazzling smile. Michael Thompson. Entry number 42. He checked the list. Mr. Thompson, 2024 McLaren Artura, Volcano Yellow. That's the one. Sir, he whispered, leaning in. Did you have an accident on the way here? No, son, I said. This is a custom livery. It's very avant-garde. It looks like tetanus. It's a wrap, I explained. The paint underneath is perfect. I'm protecting the asset. He hesitated. He pressed his hand to his earpiece. Control? We have entry 42 at the gate. It's the McLaren, but it looks like it survived a bomb blast. Over. There was a crackle of static. Is it leaking fluids? No, but it has a graphic of an oil leak on the hood. Let it in. If it's on the list, it's on the list. We don't want to back up at the gate. The attendant waved me through. Park in the modern supercar zone. Row B. Try not to touch the Ferraris. I drove onto the pristine grass of the fairway. The reaction was immediate and visceral. The attendees of a concours d'elegance are a specific breed. They walk with their hands clasped behind their backs, leaning forward to inspect panel gaps and stitching. They speak in hushed tones about provenance and numbers matching. As I rolled down row B, the hush turned into a gasp. I parked next to a Lamborghini Huracan STO, a car that looked like a fighter jet. Next to it, my McLaren looked like the fighter jet that had been shot down and left in the jungle for a decade. I shut off the car. I opened the door, the gray Civic door, and stepped out. Sarah followed, looking effortlessly chic. Pop the engine cover, Vinny said, appearing out of nowhere. He had actually bought a polo shirt, though his tattoos were still visible on his arms, making him look like a bouncer at a yacht club. I propped open the rear deck. The pristine, complex hybrid V6 engine bay gleamed in the sunlight, a shocking jewel inside a rotten box. Okay, I said. Let the games begin. The first hour was a mix of horror and confusion. Older gentlemen in blazers would walk up, frown, adjust their glasses, and stare at the rust. Why? One man asked me. He was wearing a monocle. I am not making this up. An actual monocle. Why would you do this to a British automobile? It's a commentary on the transience of material wealth, I improvised. It challenges the viewer to look past the surface. It looks like shit, he huffed, and walked away. But then, the tide turned. Around noon, the younger crowd arrived. The YouTubers, the influencers, the kids with cameras that cost more than my first car. They swarmed. Yo, is that the zombie McLaren? A kid with a backward hat yelled. I saw this on TikTok. This thing is legendary. Can I get a picture? Is the rust real? Can I touch it? Suddenly, my car was the most popular exhibit at the show. The pristine Ferraris were being ignored. Everyone wanted a selfie with the rust bucket. I saw the judges making their rounds. They were a trio of serious-looking men with clipboards. They stopped at the Lamborghini next to me. They took notes. They nodded. Then they stepped in front of my car. The lead judge, a man named Sterling, because of course his name was Sterling, looked at the duct tape. He looked at the zip ties. He looked at the "My other car is a Porsche" bumper sticker. He looked at me. Mr. Thompson, Sterling said. Mr. Sterling? This is unexpected. We aim to surprise. Sterling reached out and touched the fender. The wrap, quality is actually quite extraordinary. The registration of the print across the panel gaps is perfect. Vinyl Voodoo, I said, gesturing to Vinny. The man is an artist. It's subversive, Sterling mused. It mocks the very event we are attending. It mocks the sanctity of the supercar. It is punk rock. He wrote something on his clipboard. He didn't smile, but his eyes twinkled. Good luck, Mr. Thompson. By 3:00 p.m., the crowd around the car was 3 deep. I was answering questions, letting kids sit in the driver's seat, and handing out business cards for Vinny's shop. A man in a sharp navy suit approached me. He didn't look like a car enthusiast. He looked like money. "Mr. Thompson?" he asked. "That's me. My name is Marcus Thorne. I'm a collector, mostly vintage Porsches, but I dabble in modern limited runs." "Nice to meet you, Marcus." "I've been watching the reaction to this car all day," he said, gesturing to the throng of teenagers taking videos. "I have a pristine Artura in my collection. Same color. Nobody looks at it." "Perfection is boring," I said. "Exactly," Marcus nodded. This has narrative. This has energy. I'm curious. Is it for sale?" I froze. "Excuse me?" "The car, as it sits, with the wrap. I'd like to buy it." I looked at Sarah. She raised an eyebrow. "I hadn't really thought about selling it," I said. "I'm in the middle of a legal battle with my HOA over it." Marcus laughed. "I heard. That's what makes it great. It's the spite car. That adds value. The story adds value." He pulled out a card. "I'll offer you $300,000 for it. Today." My jaw nearly hit the grass. The car cost $250,000 new. He was offering me a $50,000 profit because it looked like trash. I can't sell it yet," I said, my mind racing. "I need it for court. I need the physical evidence." "Fair enough," Marcus said. "But I'm willing to put that offer in writing, a formal letter of intent. Would that help your case?" I grinned. "Marcus, you have no idea how much that would help." He pulled out a tablet, typed up a quick formal offer, signed it digitally, and emailed it to me on the spot. $300,000, he reiterated. "Offer stands for 30 days. Call me when you win." I had the golden ticket. At 4:00 p.m., the awards ceremony began. We gathered around the podium. They announced the winners for Best in Show, a 1930s Duesenberg, naturally, and Best Modern Exotic, the Lamborghini next to me. "And finally," the announcer said into the microphone, "we have the People's Choice Award. This is voted on by the attendees via the QR codes at each display. This year, we had a record number of votes." The announcer paused. He looked at the card. He looked confused. "The winner, by a landslide, is entry 42, the 2024 McLaren Artura, Urban Decay." The crowd erupted. The kids cheered. The influencers whooped. Even some of the stuffy old guys clapped. I walked up to the podium, grabbed the crystal trophy, and held it high. "I'd like to thank my wife," I said into the mic. "My rapper, Vinny. And most importantly, I'd like to thank the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. Without their lack of imagination, this art project would never have happened." Laughter rippled through the crowd. I walked off the stage with a trophy in one hand and a written offer for $300,000 in the other. "Vinny," I said as we walked back to the car, "I need you to write an affidavit." "About what?" "About the fact that this wrap constitutes a custom artistic modification that has demonstrably increased the market value of the vehicle." "I can do that," Vinny grinned. "And I'm going to call my friend Jim," I added. "He's a certified real estate appraiser." "What for?" "Because if the car is an appreciating asset that wins awards," I said, looking at the ugly, beautiful machine, "then keeping it in the driveway isn't lowering property values. It's raising the neighborhood's profile." The following Monday, I met with my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Jessica, who specialized in property law and hated HOAs with a passion usually reserved for telemarketers. I laid everything out on her conference table. The text of Resolution 404, the photos of the car proving no actual rust exists, The People's Choice Trophy. The viral statistics. 2 million views on TikTok. The letter of intent from Marcus Thorne offering $300,000. The affidavit from Vinny regarding the protective nature of the vinyl. Jessica looked through the pile. She started smiling. Then she started laughing. "Mike," she said, "this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Do we have a case?" "We don't just have a case," she said. "We have a nukes. They are suing you for diminution of value. That is their whole argument. They claim your car makes the neighborhood look poor." She held up the offer letter. "You have proof that the car is worth more than a standard model. You have proof that it is an award-winning art piece. You have proof that the rust is a deliberate, high-value customization. So we can win? We can destroy them," she said. "I'm going to file a motion for summary judgment. I'm going to argue that the HOA's enforcement is arbitrary, capricious, and legally baseless because the vehicle violates neither the letter of the bylaw, no rust, nor the spirit of the covenant, value preservation. And the good faith clause? We'll argue that creating a culturally relevant art car is the ultimate act of good faith. You're bringing culture to the suburbs." She cracked her knuckles. "I'm going to enjoy deposing Barbara." The deposition of Barbara Patterson took place 2 weeks later in a glass-walled conference room. Barbara sat across from me. She looked diminished. The stress of the zombie car situation was getting to her. Her visor was askew. Jessica was ruthless. "Ms. Patterson," Jessica asked, the camera rolling, "can you define rust for the record?" It's metal rot," Barbara snapped. "It's orange stuff on cars." "Is it a chemical process? Oxidation?" "I suppose." "Does Mr. Thompson's car have oxidation?" "It looks like it does." "I'm not asking what it looks like. I'm asking what it is. Have you inspected the vehicle physically?" No, I wouldn't touch that thing." "If you had," Jessica slid a report across the table, "you would know that it is 3M vinyl. Plastic. Are plastic stickers prohibited in Whispering Pines?" "No, but—" "And are you aware," Jessica continued, sliding the letter of intent across, "that a collector has offered $300,000 for the vehicle in its current condition? That is $50,000 over MSRP." Barbara stared at the paper. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "So," Jessica leaned in, "you are fining a resident for parking a $300,000 asset in his driveway. An asset that just won People's Choice at the Grand Dominion Concours. Are you arguing that an award-winning show car lowers property values?" "It's ugly!" Barbara shrieked, losing her composure. "It's ugly and I hate it!" "And there we have it," Jessica said calmly to the court reporter. "Admission of arbitrary enforcement based on personal taste. Thank you, Ms. Patterson. We're done here." We walked out of the deposition feeling like we had just won the Super Bowl. Barbara stayed in the room, staring at the table, realizing that her empire of beige was crumbling around her. But the final blow hadn't landed yet. That would come in the courtroom. I drove home in the zombie McLaren. The wrap was starting to look even better to me now. It didn't look like rust anymore. It looked like money. I pulled into the neighborhood. I waved at the gate guard. As I turned onto my street, I saw something strange. Mr. Henderson, the grumpy lawyer 2 doors down, was in his driveway. He was washing his car. His pristine white Mercedes S-Class. But it wasn't white anymore. He had put a giant sticker on the door. It was a jagged, graphic splatter that looked like a bullet hole. I slowed down. "Frank!" I yelled. "What happened?" Frank looked up. He grinned. He pointed to the sticker. "Vinyl!" he shouted. "Thought I'd add some character. Barbara hates it." I laughed. The revolution had begun. The courtroom for the Circuit Court of Civil Appeals was surprisingly majestic. High ceilings, mahogany paneling, and the faint smell of old law books and desperation. It was a fitting arena for the final showdown between the forces of suburban tyranny and the forces of petty creative expression. I sat at the defendant's table next to Jessica. She looked relaxed, like a shark swimming through a school of particularly slow tuna. On the other side of the aisle sat Barbara, flanked by the HOA's lawyer, a man named Mr. Pinch who looked exactly like his name implied. Judge Reynolds entered. He was an older man with bushy eyebrows and a reputation for having zero tolerance for frivolity. I was slightly worried. My car was the definition of frivolity. "Case number 24-CV-009, the bailiff announced. Whispering Pines Homeowners Association v. Michael Thompson. Judge Reynolds adjusted his glasses and looked down at the file. He flipped a page. He flipped another page. He paused. He looked up at me. "Mr. Thompson," the judge said, his voice gravelly. "Am I understanding this complaint correctly? The HOA is suing you because your car is ugly." "Objection!" Mr. Pinch stood up, smoothing his suit. "Your Honor, the plaintiff contends that the defendant's vehicle violates the community covenants regarding maintenance and repair. The vehicle presents the visual appearance of a dilapidated wreck, thereby causing a nuisance and diminishing property values." "Sit down, Mr. Pinch," the judge said. "I'm asking the defendant." "Your Honor," I stood up. "The HOA is suing me because they don't understand the difference between trompe-l'oeil art and actual garbage." "Is the car actually rusty?" the judge asked. "No, sir. It is a 2024 McLaren Artura. It has a carbon fiber monocoque chassis and aluminum body panels. It is chemically impossible for it to rust in the manner depicted." "It's a wrap?" "Yes, sir. High-grade vinyl." The judge sighed and looked at the photos attached to the complaint. He held one up, a picture of the duct tape on my front bumper. "It looks very real," the judge admitted. "Thank you, Your Honor. I paid $5,000 for that realism." "Mr. Pinch," the judge turned to the plaintiff, "if I paint a mural of a crack in my house on the side of my house, is my house structurally unsound?" "No, Your Honor, but nothing. You are citing the defendant for rust and disrepair. If the rust is a picture and the disrepair is an illusion, then the citation is factually incorrect. You can't fine someone for a hallucination." "But the value," Mr. Pinch argued, pivoting to their main strategy. "The covenants require residents to maintain property values. This monstrosity makes the neighborhood look like a slum. It drives down prices." Jessica stood up. "Your Honor, if I may?" "Proceed." Jessica walked to the bench. "We move to dismiss the claim of diminution of value with prejudice. We have evidence that the vehicle in question is actually an appreciating asset, specifically because of its appearance." She handed the bailiff the letter of intent from Marcus Thorne. "This is a formal offer to purchase the vehicle for $300,000, Jessica narrated. "That is $50,000 over the market value of a standard model. Furthermore, we have the People's Choice Award from the Grand Dominion Concours d'Elegance, verifying its status as a recognized work of automotive art." The judge took the letter. He read it. His eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Someone offered 300 grand for a car that looks like it has tetanus? The judge asked, genuinely shocked. The art market is irrational, Your Honor, I offered from the table. But the money is real. The judge looked at Barbara. She was shrinking in her seat. Ms. Patterson, the judge said, did you know about this valuation? I was told during the deposition, Barbara whispered. So, the judge leaned forward, removing his glasses. You are asking this court to enforce a fine against a man for owning a car that is worth more than most of the houses in your subdivision, simply because you personally find it distasteful? It's not just me, Barbara cried, standing up despite her lawyer trying to pull her down. It's the principle. We have rules. We have beige houses and green lawns and silver cars. We don't have this. He's mocking us. He's laughing at us? He is certainly laughing, the judge observed. But mockery is not a tort, Ms. Patterson, and enforcing your personal aesthetic preference under the guise of maintenance repair is an abuse of the covenant. The gavel came down. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Case dismissed. The fines are vacated. The lien is removed. And Mr. Pinch, the judge looked at the lawyer, I am awarding legal fees to the defendant. This lawsuit was frivolous and a waste of the court's time. But, Barbara started. Dismissed, the judge barked. And Mr. Thompson? Yes, Your Honor? If you ever decide to sell that thing, call me. My grandson would love a ride. The ride home was a victory lap. I stopped at a gas station to buy a Gatorade, and 3 people stopped to take pictures of the car. I realized then that I wasn't just driving a car. I was driving a celebrity. When I pulled into Whispering Pines, the atmosphere had shifted. The fear was gone. I saw Frank, Henderson's Mercedes with the bullet hole sticker. I saw the Johnsons had put a Zombie Response Team sticker on their pristine Land Rover. It was a small rebellion, but it was there. I parked in the driveway. Barbara's house was dark. Her blinds were drawn. The next day, the email went out to the community. Subject: Board resignation. Due to health reasons and a desire to spend more time with my grandchildren, I am resigning as president of the WPHOA, effective immediately. She quit. She couldn't handle the loss. The zombie McLaren had defeated the Queen of Beige. Life returned to normal. Or as normal as it gets when you drive a car that looks like a prop from The Walking Dead. The HOA paid my legal fees. Jessica bought a boat with her commission. Vinny became the most requested rapper in the state. He had a 3-month waiting list of people wanting the Thompson Special. I kept the rust wrap for another 4 months. I grew fond of it. It was liberating. I never had to wash the car. I didn't care about stone chips because they just added to the realism. I could park anywhere, and nobody dared to door ding me because they assumed I didn't have insurance. But eventually, the novelty began to fade. The joke had been told. The punchline had landed. And if I'm being honest, I missed the yellow. I missed the shine. It was time. I called Vinny. Is it time to bring the sun back? Vinny asked when I walked into the shop. I think so, I said. Barbara is gone. The new president is a guy named Dave, who wears cargo shorts and doesn't care about anything as long as the pool is open. The war is over. End of an era, Vinny sighed, looking at the fake rust one last time. This car is a legend. It served its purpose, I said. Peel it. It took them 2 days to remove the vinyl. Underneath, the volcano yellow paint was as pristine as the day I bought it. It was like unwrapping a piece of candy that had been saved for a special occasion when I picked it up. It was blindingly beautiful. It looked fast, expensive, and respectable. I drove it home. I felt like a normal person. A rich, normal person, but normal nonetheless. I pulled into the driveway. The sun glinted off the perfect curves. It looked like a spaceship again. I got out and walked toward the house. I looked over at Barbara's house. She was sitting on her porch. She wasn't the president anymore, but she was still Barbara. She was watching me. She saw the shiny yellow car. She saw the rust was gone. She smiled. It was that same smug, self-satisfied smile from months ago. She stood up and walked to the railing. Finally came to your senses, Michael?" she called out. Her voice was dripping with, "I told you so." I stopped. My hand was on the door handle. "Looks like you finally realized that trash doesn't belong in this neighborhood," she continued. "I knew you'd cave eventually. The peer pressure always wins." She thought she had won. She thought, I had removed the wrap because I was ashamed, or because I wanted to fit in. She didn't understand that I had removed it because I was bored. I looked at her. I looked at her smug face. I looked at the beige siding of her house. I felt a twitch in my eye. "Actually, Barb," I said, "I just took it off to make room for the new design." Her smile faltered. "New design?" "Yeah," I said. "The rust was a bit dark. I wanted something brighter, something more organic." "What are you talking about?" I didn't answer. I just winked, went inside, and called Vinny. "Don't tell me," Vinny answered on the first ring. "You miss it." "I don't miss the rust," I said, "but I have a new concept. Barbara needs a reminder." "What are we thinking?" Vinny asked, the excitement returning to his voice. "Dairy," I said. "Dairy?" "Swiss cheese, Vinny. I want the car to look like a giant, moldy block of Swiss cheese. I want holes. I want green fuzz. I want it to look like it's fermenting." There was a pause. Then a cackle. "I'll order the yellow vinyl. See you Monday." 3 days later. I pulled into the driveway. The car was no longer volcano yellow. It was a pale, sickly, creamy yellow. Printed all over the sides were hyper-realistic graphics of holes. Deep, concave holes. And around the edges of the holes, Vinny had added mold. Fuzzy, green, white, and gray mold textures that looked so real you could practically smell the penicillin. It was hideous. It was worse than the rust. The rust was cool. It was industrial. This was biological. This was repulsive. I parked it. The cheese Lauren glowed in the afternoon sun. I stepped out. Barbara was there. She had been waiting for the clean car to come back. She stood up. She stared. She took off her glasses. She rubbed them. She put them back on. She stared again. "Is that," she choked, "is that mold?" "It's cultured, Barbara," I shouted happily. "It's aged, like a fine wine," she stared at. The giant cheese wedge sitting on 4 wheels. She looked at the green fuzz graphics. She didn't scream. She didn't yell. She didn't call the police. She just sat down heavily in her rocking chair. She put her face in her hands. And she started to cry. I watched her for a moment. I felt a twinge of guilt, just a tiny one, about the size of a single electron. Then I looked at my beautiful, moldy $300,000 block of cheese. I revved the engine. The V6 roared, a lion trapped in a dairy product. I winked at her shaking shoulders. "Hungry work," I said to myself. I walked inside, grabbed my keys to the Ford Ranger, which I had bought back from Dave for $3,000 because I missed her, and headed out the door. "Where are you going?" Sarah asked, looking up from her book. She didn't even blink at the cheese car in the driveway. She was used to it now. "Taco Bell," I said. I'm in the mood for something cheesy.